Thanks very much, Gupta. Yes, so I thought I'd start with another story about my niece. So indulge me, it's Christmas, and I thought, just because I think she's such a good teacher to me, and she really makes this point that I'm going to make first of all really clear. So I thought I'd start off with this story. So so it goes back to I went to see her at her birthday party. So this was now a few months ago. She was having a birthday, and she was quite young still, but very excited about her birthday. And all day, her parents and me and the family were giving her lots of presents, and everyone was telling her about her new age. You know, the children are like obsessed with their age, aren't they? And they were all telling her her new age, and she was sort of taking that in, and she had a badge with her age on, and lots of cards saying her age, and she was like, hearing about her new age all the time. And so we went on this walk anyway, and another walk. And this time there was no accidents, so you'll be glad to know. But we were still she's very chatty, and we were just walking along, and she was just chatting away, and I was just listening, and sometimes holding hands. Sometimes we were sort of, again, running a bit and playing. And at one point I saw her sort of run forward, and she ran quite close into the nettles. So you're gonna think, what sort of uncle am I? But anyway, she's quite fast. Anyway, so she ran into the nettles, and I said to her, she's called Gally. I said, Gally, watch out! Be careful! You can't go into the nettles. Stay away from the nettles, and sort of help to come out and sort of try to move her away from the nettles. Being a good uncle. And I said to her, you can't. And I turned around to her and I said, Gally, you can't play in the nettles. And she turned round to me again with a really, really serious face and really sincere, and said to me, I know, I'm 4. Like that. And I said, oh, sorry, you're absolutely right. Teach me everything. You're 4, you are 4. And I was just really struck by that, because again, what I was struck by was this instinct that we know what life's about, and it seems like it's very, very deep, because even when we're children, we think we know what life's about. We think we know everything, and interestingly, it's the exact opposite quality that I think the Buddha to be had when he embarked on his quest. So the Buddha to be, Siddhartha, he had a quality of what we call receptivity. So this willingness to learn, this sense that in a way we've got everything to learn. We need to find the mystery of life. It's the meaning of life. It's a quest. It's a journey. It's a learning process. And that's in a way where the story picks up. So we heard last night that Siddhartha he exchanged his princely clothes for beggar's clothes, and cut off his hair, and then walked off without his horse into the forest, into the terrifying forest full of demons, man-eating tigers, it says in the scriptures, robbers and wolves, and really had to face himself doing that. So, but he did that with this sense of there's everything to learn. And what I'm going to do in this talk is sort of take us through the story, but also try to weave in this notion of the true individual. So I'm going to suggest that Siddhartha and then the Buddha really was a true individual. And I'm going to try and explain what a true individual is, why it's important, why we too could become true individuals, and also why the world, and it feels like quite an even more scary, divided world at the moment, why the world really needs true individuals. So first of all, I thought I'd just try and define what a true individual is. So in simple terms, I think a true individual is somebody that takes responsibility for their own mind and renounces blame and is committed to taking responsibility for their own mind. In fact, in a way, that's the whole talk, actually. So if you just remember one thing, you can just remember that. I am going to carry on, though, so don't worry. But that is really the nub of the talk, is that what we need to do is take responsibility for our own mind and renounce blame. And in that way, we'll grow. And if we do that to the nth degree, that's actually what enlightenment really is. So how do we take responsibility for our own mind? How do we become a true individual? Anyway, what are the qualities of a true individual? Well, I'm going to suggest there are three main qualities, and then go into the Buddha's life story to sort of give examples of these qualities from the Buddha's own life story. So the three main qualities that we need to become a true individual. The first one is self-consciousness. The second one is to be set apart from the group. And the third one is to be a creative influence on the world. So self-consciousness, being set apart from the group, and the third one being a creative influence on the world. So and of course it starts with receptivity. So that's really important. So to remember that. So let's have a look at the first one, self-consciousness. How did Siddhartha develop this self-consciousness, and what does it really mean? So he, as I say, entered the forest and faced demons, faced tigers, and just in a way worked on it. Well, what he did was he worked on his mind. That's the first thing he did. And he had to work with fear. Fear often stops us doing things, indecision. That feeling when you're indecisive and you don't actually decide to do anything, and you don't actually do anything. Well, he had to overcome that. So he sort of overcame his fear, and that helped him to act. And then he wanted to work on his mind more formally, in a way a bit like what we're doing on this retreat. So because he was receptive, he had everything to learn, he found a teacher. And that teacher was called Alara Kalama. And the Buddha to-be was quite ambitious, and he just really applied himself to meditation. Again, a bit like what we've been doing in the meditations. And he entered... He found that he got into dhyana, the dhyana superconscious states, quite easily. He went down all the different levels and entered something called the sphere of nothingness. I don't know what that is, but it sounds good. But what he was really doing was really working on his mind. And actually, he did so well that the teacher said to him, "Why don't you actually lead the group with me? We can jointly lead the group." Which is obviously such a good meditator. But he felt he was like, no, that's actually not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the answer, the truth to life. I'm not really interested in leadership in that way. Status, really. I'm not interested in status. That's not what I'm looking for. So that's not, in a way, that wasn't the way to work on his mind. So he said, not for me, and then left again. Again, he was on his own, looking for another teacher. This time he found a second teacher, this time called Udaka Ramiputra, and again quickly learned different types of meditation and did really well with that one. And this time he did so well that the teacher said, "I tell you what, you're so good, why don't you just lead the whole thing? Forget about me, you're now in charge of everything." Can you imagine? Imagine if that had happened at work, your boss says, "Actually, you're so good at your job, you can just run the whole company." You'd be like, "Yes, brilliant. Right, they're fired." Coffee machine, brilliant. Or you'd take it up, wouldn't you? You'd do it. But Siddhartha, he said, "No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for status. I'm looking for something more than that." And what he was doing there was he definitely was working on his mind, though. He definitely realized that to be a true individual, he had to work on his mind. And that's the basis of taking responsibility for it, of course. So he worked on integration. He was doing mindfulness. Also, he was working. Well, he must have been working on positive emotion, metta. And I think we need to remember that to be a true individual, we really need to develop positive emotion. And boy, does the world need us to do that. So, and that's because we can't rely on our natural human warmth, because we do have natural human warmth. Warmth is within us, but we can't rely on it to just express itself into compassion, sensitivity, and joy. I don't think we can just assume it happens. I think when I was younger, I definitely thought I would just be a really nice person and really compassionate, but I really have had to work on that, work on my emotions to sort of really let them out and up and out. And you can see it, can't you, in people in the world, that people that aren't working on positive emotion, you've all probably met the sort of grumpy old person or even worse in life. You can sort of see sometimes people that aren't working on positive emotion, in a way, what happens. And I think, there's nothing, not judging them, but I'm just saying we can't assume that positive emotion will just happen. And really, everyone wants to be emotional, not emotional, but everybody feels that their emotions drive them. That's it, I think. And, because when you say, I want to be happy in life, that's an emotion, that's a feeling, isn't it? It's not a thought. So we all know the importance of emotion. But unless we're careful, our emotions can naturally tend towards being crude or violent even. Just think of like a football match, for example. The crowd at a football match, there's a lot of emotion there, but it tends to be very crude. Or even worse, mob violence, when that happens, again, a lot of emotion there. But that's not what we're looking for with our emotion. We need to really, to be a true individual, we need to refine our emotions. And the key message, which is, and this is quite challenging, and being challenging in a way slightly provoking on purpose, because I think there is challenge in the Dharma, and I think this is one of the challenging areas. I think we need to recognize that our emotional experience is self-created. Now, that's actually quite a challenging statement to hear, I know, because obviously our emotions often feel like they're to do with other people, things that have happened to us in the past, and that's all true, that other people and other things have an effect on us, of course they do, but so it is challenging to hear that our emotional experience is self-created. But remember, at the same time, it's very, very powerful and very, very liberating if we can really believe that. Because what that means is that our emotional state isn't dependent on anyone else being good or bad to us. Is that our emotional state is self-created. So that's wonderful, and that means that we have the power then to take responsibility for our mind, and we have the power for our own mental states. The state of how we are, which is again hard to think about, because I often don't really believe that. Say I'm working at the GP practice, and sometimes there's a lot of aggression or anger at reception from patients or whatever, and if I try and meet that, I get very anxious or upset, and I often just blame them, and don't want them to be doing that. So I don't. But what I actually need to do always is just keep taking responsibility for my own mind. And when I can do that a little bit, even when I'm responding to, say, aggression or something like that, then empathy comes in. And often, if I have empathy to say towards patients that are upset or angry, then the situation does calm down. So I just need to remember to sort of keep taking responsibility for my own mind, and that has an effect on others. So it does work, but you have to sort of do it, it does work. I'll come back to, also, it doesn't mean we need to be walkovers either, by the way, and I'll come back to how we can influence the world in positive ways later. But I think the starting point, anyway, is that we need to take responsibility for our own minds and recognise that our emotional experience is self-created. So if we start with that, then we can do something about it, which is where the liberation can happen. And not only that do we need to be working on positive emotion, like Siddhartha, but we also, I think we need to have a sense of what is reality, what is life about, what's reality, because just working on mindfulness and positive emotion isn't enough. It's great and it's a brilliant start, and in a way that's why I came to the Buddhist Centre, to feel calmer and happier. It's a brilliant start, but what I realised was the more I went into my mind, the more I saw what the mind was really like, what reality was like, and I wanted to know more. And I realised that the more that the two balance each other out. So you can't really have, if you want to be really, really calm, you have to face things like, death, and what happens when we die, and what is mind. You have to face those things to be really, really calm, and to be really, really happy, you have to be completely selfless to have positive emotion. So you do need to look at reality as well. The two go together and influence each other as well, of course. So and so I think what Siddhartha had was a sense that life isn't what we make it. There's something more to life. I remember learning about this at medical school, that you're watching me now, aren't you? Or you're watching me at home, and we think we're watching you. You think you're watching me like a video camera, like I'm a real thing out here, and you're in there, and like what you're seeing is sort of reality, and it sort of is. I am actually here, but this is the weird thing. Stay with me. That what you're actually seeing is, of course, light that's being bounced off me, going into your eye, and that light is upside down. So the light comes into your eye, and the image of me is upside down on the back of the eye. It's then transmitted to the back of the brain for processing, and on the other side of the brain as well. So the right side is transmitted to the left, and the left side transmitted to the right. The brain then does something. That's the technical term. And produces an image, produces an image and makes us think and feel like we are seeing the world how it is. And that's just sights. Think about sound, taste, touch, thoughts that are happening, all our emotions. So the reality isn't what we think it is, even just on a scientific, physical level, if you see what I mean. Everything's being filtered through our mind all the time. And that means the state of our mind is the state of the world. Like we know that if we're in a bad mood, we see things differently. We see things, in terms of a bad mood, for example. But we believe that we're seeing everything objectively, which of course we're not. But there is something that's real, of course, going on. But it's just not how we think, not what we think it is. So I think to be a true individual and to develop self-consciousness, we've always got to have this at the back of our minds. No, well, not literally, because that's... Anyway, we always have to have this... we have to have this, at the back of our minds, that be aware of the truth behind appearances. That, and I think Siddhartha had that, didn't he? He knew that the pleasure palace just was a very surface way to live, that there was more to life. There's something beyond the appearance of all the material pleasure that he had. And you want to just keep having almost like in Buddhism we call that the transcendental, like a direct relationship with the transcendental, what reality is, the mysterious nature of the universe, the fabric of things. If that's alive, then this self-consciousness discovery is alive, and that's you then being more of a true individual, if you've got that in mind. Even just the question, what's really going on? So with that, I think Siddhartha was very, very aware of all that, and was really developing his self-consciousness in that way. But as I said, let's go back to the story. He just felt like, these teachings, these meditation teachings, they're not enough. It's not working. I've still not got to the truth of things. So he was trying to figure out what to do. And on the one hand, the sort of pleasure palace hadn't worked. He had everything he possibly wanted. It hasn't worked. So he thought, well, what about the opposite then? What about if I sort of subjugate the body and self-mortify? So he joined a band of ascetics that, in a way, practiced, asceticism. So, for example, he slept on a bed of nails. He ate 1 grain of rice a day. He was naked and just sat under the hot sun without sun cream. I don't think there was sun cream then, but he got burnt. He was, if it was cold, he sat outside, and what he was doing was using his will, just using his will, even though probably he felt like, oh, is this working? I don't know, or this is uncomfortable. He just kept using his will to stay, and he had a lot of will, so he got really good at it, actually. And in fact, he got so good at asceticism that, again, he had a band of not only was he part of the group, but a band of the people in the group started following him. And they were really impressed with him. They sort of were revering him for how good he was at renouncing the world. But what happened is one day he just got so ill from it that he collapsed. And he collapsed and sort of fell down a riverbank. And a woman who was working in the field noticed that he'd collapsed and went over to help. She had some, I think, rice milk, and gave him some rice milk and said, eat this, you look, your skin and bones, you've collapsed. And he thought, you know what, I am going to have the rice milk. Maybe a bit more poetically than that, I think. A bit like dessert tonight. I'm going to have the dessert. He felt like what he really reflected on, that look, it's not working. Whatever I'm doing isn't working. So why kill myself? It's not working. So that's why he accepted help. And his followers that were following him at that time, they were disgusted. They were absolutely disgusted. They were like, "What are you doing? Like, we respect you. I can't believe it." If that had happened today, it'd be cancelled. Yeah, absolutely cancelled. Completely. They were completely offended, and there was no room for any diversity of opinion. That's not the way you do it. Cancelled. So that was interesting. So what can we learn from that? So I think, in terms of being a true individual, we can move on to our second point. So he's developed self-consciousness, the first point, and now what he's doing here is setting himself apart from the group. So what does that mean? Well, I'll try and unpack it a bit. So we were saying in our group today, weren't we, that the group pressure is very, very strong, and is very, very strong human instinct. Of course, we like friends, we need friends, but group pressure, what group pressure is, it tries to serve the interests of the group rather than the interests of the individual or value. So, for example, groups tend to sort of talk about other groups in a negative way to strengthen their group. Groups tend to be disapproving of you if you try to leave the group, or if you're against in any way the group, they'll be disapproving of you. Groups try to always, in a way, make their own group survive above any other group, and that's when it can get dangerous. And of course, ultimately that can lead to violence, wars in the end. But if we just come back to, say, our friendship groups, you might have had that experience of sometimes feeling that, like, say you're in the pub or something, sometimes feeling that the conversation isn't really the conversation that matches your values. Have you ever had that experience where lots of people are maybe making some offensive jokes, or sort of using harsh speech, or you can see that they're not developing their self-consciousness, basically, like you might be. And it can be very difficult because there's a sort of like, you don't want to like be the one that stands up, puts the head above the parapet and say, oh, that's not funny, or, etc. And at the same time, you feel uncomfortable because you don't agree with what they're talking about or the way they're talking, or and you don't quite know what to do. Often the instinct is to say nothing, or to people please, or to join in the gossiping. Gossiping is a very strong group instinct as well, of course, because that's the survival instinct. So it's very difficult, but if you do want to be a true individual, you do have to try not to give in to group pressure, and in a way stand up for what you believe in. Another way of thinking about it is to not be you don't need to be psychologically dependent on the group. Often we get our validation from being in a group, but from a true individual perspective, we don't need that. You can have self-validation. If you're practicing self-consciousness, you'll know that you don't need that. You don't feel like you need validation, and you don't need approval. And at the same time, you don't need approval. So if we go back to the Siddhartha in this instance as well, not only did he not give in to group pressure, because he was like, I don't want, this isn't working for me, I don't want to do this. But he also, which was a mature thing to do, was admit that he made a mistake, and without blame. So like that's incredible, really, because often, can you imagine if you'd been following a teacher in a group for a year and nearly died, you might have something to say, where's the complaint form, where's the feedback form, which is understandable, but he's like, because he could have easily blamed and say this doesn't work, but he was like, look, it's not worked, I've made a mistake, and I'm going to move on. Simple, clean, no blame. And when I say no blame, I mean also not blaming himself as well. Like he was taking responsibility for himself, but he's not blaming himself. It's not a negative thing. So that's important to remember when I say take responsibility and eschew blame. You're not blaming yourself either. And I think, I was just thinking, what's the modern equivalent of this, like asceticism, because I don't know many people in the room that might fall for that. Maybe Dave Mitra a little bit. But I don't know many people that would sort of fall for, like, should we sleep on a bed of nails or that. But I think maybe the modern equivalent is, I was thinking, the intense careers that we fall for in London. For example, like some of my friends I know are investment bankers, and it seems like they often like work themselves to the bone for this myth of, well, their myth of money, really, the myth of self-development, promotion. I've seen it time and time again where people are working like 12-hour days, and I used to think, isn't that been banned? What happened to all like the labour laws and the child labour laws, etc. Not children, but I mean what happened? All the regulations to stop people overworking. It feels like that doesn't apply as long as you're making loads of money. They sort of do. I think nearly kill themselves. I think for the sake of work and career, and also it's like I had this experience similarly. As I was saying, I went to medical school, worked as a doctor in hospital, and there's very much a sense sometimes of like, because the shifts, like the on-call shifts at night, were like 12-hour shifts, and there's very much a culture of like, you just did the 12-hour shift, and then anything else extra on top, you just did it. You had to be, in a way, you had to be the hero. Everyone was doing it. The NHS is stretched, so you just, in a way, don't even think about yourself. Just I don't know, just work yourself to the bone. And of course, there's an altruism in that, being a doctor, compassion, of course, but I don't think it was motivated by that in the hospital. I think a lot of the time it was motivated by career and feeling like worthless if you're not a hero, and different negative states, really, because doctors can be quite competitive, and when they a lot of them wanted to climb the sort of ladders to get to consultants or whatever it was. So there was definitely a sense, again, I saw it firsthand, of like working yourself to the bone for career, and the sense that if you didn't, the group would disapprove of you. So I remember once, I was paid to do 9 to 5, and once I finished all the jobs on the ward that I thought I'd done and left about 5 o'clock, and the next day I got, it's lots of disparaging looks and a harsh message from a colleague saying, like, I can't believe you left, how dare you, sort of thing. But I was like, I'm going to leave, because I need to preserve myself, or I can't look after anybody else, sort of thing. So there was so it's a balance, of course, but I think it's interesting that we need to be careful that we don't do that to ourselves as well. And also accept when we've made a mistake. So even if you have gone down the career ladder and you're working 12 hours, and it's you have to say at some point, this isn't working. And that can be hard because you might have done all the degrees and all the studies for it, for example. But anyway, so that's what Siddhartha did, and he as I say, set himself apart from the group, and in that way, he was a true individual. Coming more towards the final part of the talk now, not only did Siddhartha admit he made a mistake, but he also wanted to carry on. And the third quality of a true individual, I think, as I was saying, is being creative. And then from that, having a creative influence on the world. That's what creativity does. It has an influence, doesn't it? If you think about art or genuine creativity, it always has an influence, an outgoing quality. And he put his mind to the problem, what do I do now? And his creative solution was to remember that when he was younger, he got very absorbed in meditation, just without not much will, just by sitting under a tree and watching his father plough the land. It was a rose apple tree, and he sat there for about all day, really, just in a deep state of absorption, just very naturally. And it said even that the shadow that the tree was making stayed in the same position throughout the day. And I think that's a metaphor for timelessness, like it was an experience of timelessness for him. And he realized that's probably more the answer, as this balanced effort, like Surya Gupta was talking about this morning even, that will alone can only get you so far. You also need receptivity and patience and a sort of naturalness that comes from what he was doing under the tree. So what he did was he said that he was going to then sit under another tree and sit there until he became enlightened, using this image of the rose apple tree. And we'll say more about that in the next talk in a few nights' time. So I'm not going to say more about the enlightenment, but I'm going to say a bit more about the after effects of it, though, because what happened was, in the end, I hope this isn't a spoiler, he did get enlightened, and from then onwards, he was a genuinely creative influence on the world. So the first thing he did actually after that was go and find his old friends. So even though he's a true individual, it doesn't mean friendship's not important. That's the key message here, and community is not important. But what a true individual does is they can contribute to friendship and community in a more positive, in ultimately a more positive way, because they're not looking for something from the group themselves. They're just looking in a way to support other true individuals. And that, of course, is the basis of Sangha. That Sangha is an association of people trying to be true individuals, a mutual association of people trying to be individuals, so trying to help each other grow. So that's what Sangha really is, at its best. So that's what that's what the Buddha did once he was enlightened. Went to find his old friends, and again wasn't annoyed at them or anything. And just again, there's another talk about that, so I'm not going to go into it in detail. But it's just to say that friendship was very important to him, and I think what we can learn from that as well is that being a true individual also means taking responsibility for others in the world, because you have an instinct that you want others to grow as well, and that's really important. So let's just see on that. Yeah, okay, good. So I think if you can, So this is where you can really make a difference, because, for example, the Buddha, even though he's taking responsibility for his own mind, like I was saying, and working on his reactions, and at the same time was trying to challenge the status quo of the world. So the Buddha was very keen to say that it's worth, not birth. For example, when it came to caste. So in India, there's a caste system, and for him, it's very important to get the message across that it's worth, not birth, that's important. So like your worth is to do with your merit and how you act in the world. It's not to do with how you were born or what caste you're in. And and that's challenging, isn't it? To challenge sometimes the status quo in life. That when you might have that sort of similar situation where you don't feel something's right in the world. And the question for me is, how do we challenge that without making it worse? So that's what a true individual does. They can challenge the world without adding negativity to the world. It's so easy, isn't it, to have really good intentions to try and help the world, and either we don't do anything, or we do try and respond to the world and the world's problems and the world's suffering. But to the extent that we're in a negative mental state, if say we're righteously indignant or angry ourselves, that can then add more anger and hatred to the world, even though we didn't mean that. Which is a shame, because, as I say, there's a lot of good intention. You see it in the world. People really do want to help in all sorts of different ways. So the question for us is, can we engage with the world and take responsibility for our own mind, renounce blame, and in a true individual way? And I guess what that would look like is being able to disagree with other people, but without anger, or in a way, in a more positive way, encourage people to really to grow themselves and look at themselves and look at their own minds. For example, you could say even, practice the Dharma. I mean, that's what the Dharma is trying to do, is help people look at our minds. And you might have, when you go home from this retreat, for example, you might find that you can have a positive influence on the people around you just by sharing your positive mental states that you developed on this retreat, by serving. That's how you serve the Dharma. That's how you serve the truth, and in a way help the world, I think. Because that's what I think the world really needs. As I say, I'm a doctor. I do try and help in the world, by alleviating pain. But I really don't think it's enough. I think it helps a bit and enough, and it's good. But until we're all working on our minds and, in a way, getting to that root cause of suffering, which is mind-made, I don't think we can really help the world and, in a way, solve the world's problems. So what I think we need to do is, so just in summary, really, we just need to keep developing our self-consciousness, our remembering to keep this sense of the mystery of life alive, set ourselves apart from the group, and then have a creative influence on the world. And if we can accept responsibility for our own life and the effect our life has on those around us, we can then see that growth as the most important thing in our life, and then commit to that accordingly. And that will make all the difference in the world. Yeah, thanks very much.